Frontline workers keep our world moving. They work in high-stakes, fast-changing environments where technology can empower them or hold them back. And when adoption fails, the impact ripples outward, slowing teams, frustrating customers, and undermining the success of the entire organization. This is Frontline Innovators, and I'm your host, Justin Lake. In each episode, I speak with leaders who are rethinking how technology is introduced, embraced, and sustained on the front line. Leaders putting people at the heart of digital transformation. Frontline Innovators is brought to you by Skillful. We help organizations achieve lasting technology adoption for frontline teams so they can work smarter, safer, and with confidence in the tools they use every day. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Innovators podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lake, and I'm super excited for today's episode. Today's guest is a connected worker product owner in industrial technology, formerly with Suncor, who is leading industrial tech transformation in the oil sands sector with more than 14 years of experience spanning process safety engineering, operations supervision, major projects, and digital product ownership. She brings a frontline informed perspective. My favorite part, by the way, a very frontline informed perspective on how to connect workers, improve safety, and drive technology adoption in complex industrial environments. Please welcome the Frontline Innovators, Andrea Hine. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Justin.
I just realized I said process probably a little bit different than you do. So we'll talk about that later. All right. I want to start off as we have been in our 2026 series of Frontline Innovators, asking a slightly different question than we have in the past. And that question for you is, what's the biggest operational consequence of poor frontline technology adoption? What are your thoughts on that?
It's much larger than I think that we realize, and it happens all the time. It happens almost every project that I've been on. If you don't have a plan, it happens. It's a massive consequence when C-suite deploys these digital tools and they are expecting their workers to be using them for different tasks and as like a level of mitigation for risk. But when you have poor adoption at the front line and that message is not being translated to our senior leaders, that's when you start having significant events. And these are like your risk rank 1 fatalities and injuries, as well as massive financial loss with errors that are made, not following process, inaccurate information, just a whole gamut of risk and financial loss when you're not using these tools that we think we're using.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And this, I mean, exactly what you just described is why I really wanted to change the way we kick off every episode of this show, because I think for a long time on Frontline Innovators, we talked about empathy for the frontline team members, which I still hold dear. And I know from knowing you for a number of years, you still hold that dear as well. But I think what's been missing from the conversation is those of us who feel that connection with the frontline teams, we have others in the organization that we have to convince about why we should take different approaches, why we should be thinking about the things that we're talking about on this episode. And I think sometimes if we just talk about it like it's a warm, fuzzy, feel-good thing, it doesn't resonate. And it probably shouldn't resonate just for that reason, right? I think we need to flip the script a little bit and help others in the organization realize that there is actually a financial and risk consequence to not paying attention to the men and women on the front lines.
Yeah, like even if you're just about business and the dollars and cents, you have to pretend to care about your end users, or else you're not going to get the return on your investment that you think you're going to get because you'll be missing the mark. You absolutely have to pretend, even if you can't get to the empathy.
Well, that's kind of how I feel like, even if you don't, it's not coming from the heart. It's not coming from an emotional position that, hey, these are just the men and women on the front lines that are working hard and we should care about them. Like, empathy is actually good for business, because if we take care of the men and women that are taking care of our business, then everything else downstream actually works better. And for some reason, that seems like it's lost sometimes.
Yeah, and when I build a good product or I deploy the right hardware, my operators have an emotional connection with their iPhone or with their app that we've built. Like they should be emotionally invested. Like it's not just um, quantitative. Like there's a lot of qualitative and social science behind this to get it right and to get your return on investment.
Well, you've talked about this in the past, and I'd like to just explore a conversation we had previously about the ownership of devices, not necessarily like who owns the asset, but in terms of how you assign assets. Will you kind of walk us through what you learned from having done this both ways?
For sure. So, like, you're thinking about the story of when I moved from Fort McMurray oil sands down to the corporate office in Calgary with my oil and gas company. Um, we initially approached our connectivity and hardware problem or opportunity with our workforce by looking at what was available online. We were looking at shared devices, and then we deployed a bunch of those shared devices, and the usage that we got was really poor. Like we were looking at maybe 10% utilization of these shared tablets and shared phones. It was not great. And so we took a step back and we kind of asked, like, well, what are people using in their day to day life? And it turns out that my operators were using 80% iPhones and they weren't sharing their iPhones with their peers. It was one to one. And so we went back to the drawing board. We actually did a fantastic project with Otterbox at the time. And we created the first um, iPhone that's rated for hazardous locations, one of these, and we deployed that aggressively with a one-to-one device philosophy because again, like it's an emotional, very emotional thing for both leaders and for frontline workers that they have their own device. It's configured the way that they want it to be. There's so many knock-ons in terms of that being your digital signature, and knock-ons in terms of like labor relations and security and legal requirements that everyone has their own device, and then we get these massive efficiencies out of it that we didn't even realize were as big as they were with just a basic suite of applications that you would get with an iPhone. Messaging, photos, like we were looking at like well over $200 million of efficiency year on year.
Yeah. I remember one of the things that you said is that what was originally believed to be the right solution was the iPad because it was more like a clipboard, but then there was this observation that like, but nobody takes their clipboard to the grocery store.
Yeah, I have the analogy of like I'm not really that smart. I'm just observant, I'm very honest about that observance. And it's for me. I'm not taking an iPad around with me to the grocery store. I'm relying on my phone for everything. And to get groceries, if I forget my phone at home, chances are I'm going to drive back to my house to get it so that I have it with me for something as simple as groceries. And like right now, when you have all these heavy duty industrial operations, be it utilities, manufacturing, energy, these workers right now, if they're lucky, they have a radio. But other than that, they have really no connected device. They're operating some of the most dangerous and complex equipment on earth, and they don't even have a phone, and it's 2026. So, like, it was a passion project for me to make sure that we had one connected platform for my workers, and like the knock on effects from the pointy business side of things were massive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember the moment that I learned the lesson that you're describing. I had a similar experience. I was supporting an airline who had thousands of devices throughout their tech operations with all their mechanics. And back in the day, they had Panasonic tough books, the old, like, 12-pound laptop that, you could drop off of, a ladder. But they had really, really poor adoption with that technology. And so they had this idea of moving to a tablet, but they decided to roll out with consumer tablets at the time. It wasn't an Apple device, but it was, similar form factor. It was a Samsung tablet. And we predicted that this was going to be an absolute utter failure. I came from the rugged mobile device world. And so we just had convinced ourselves that if it can't, bounce off of concrete from 6 feet, then there's no way it's going to survive in these industrial applications. Right. And so after this technology had been deployed, I think we'd rolled out 1,000 or so iPads for this, or excuse me, tablets for this first project. And we saw like none of them coming back. And I was scratching my head. I'm like, something's going wrong here. Why are we not seeing like, 50 of these devices coming back into the service center every week? And so I asked the customer, can I just come out and do a site visit? You know how I feel about that. Let me just come out and see what's going on. And the first thing I noticed when I walked into their crew shack was that all the guys had their tablets tucked under their arm. They were treating that thing like it was their child, you know? And so all of a sudden, you just realize like they never treated their tough pads like that. The tough pad or tough book was like a brick. And so they treated it like a brick. Now all of a sudden you give them something glass. And by the way, to your exact point, they were assigned one to one. They were allowed to take them home. They were allowed to install a couple of applications on those devices that they could use for their own personal needs. And we had almost zero failures on those devices.
Yeah, and so, like, things and this speaks to these projects, like, there's always these red herrings in terms of what's gonna be the roadblock. One of the big roadblocks, that was supposed to be for the phone project for our workers was, well, we're in Fort McMurray, Alberta. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius and the phone's gonna stop working.
Yeah.
But in practice, like you had mentioned, the workers, they put the phones in their pocket close to their body, and it was a non-issue. Like, that could have just stop the whole project in its tracks, but you kind of, like, slog away and keep chipping away at the problem, and you just try it.
Yeah. No, I think you talked about the psychology of it, and I think that it makes such a difference. And this is an example to go back to how we started this conversation. This is an example where thinking about the warm, fuzzy stuff, thinking about the psychology parts of this is actually good for business. In both of our scenarios, the devices cost less, they're able to do more. They actually get a significantly higher return on their investment for this technology. And the adoption is actually greater because we paid some attention to the actual needs of the frontline teams and not just impose something on them that wasn't a good fit for what they were actually looking for. All right. We have so much. I think we could go deep into both of our histories and talk about rugged mobile computing and mobile technology in the field. And there's still going to be a lot of that I'm sure is going to surface up in our discussion today. But in your current role or roles, maybe I should say now, you are, I think, really rethinking some of the assumptions that maybe we've all had, established in our brains about what the needs of the front line are, what large global corporations are doing and what they will be doing in the very near future. And so I just want to start to kind of go down this path a little bit. I'd like to hear your take on AI in 2026, and of course, specifically on what you think the impact is going to be with frontline team members.
Like, I have so many thoughts. As you can tell,
Let's
there's
go. Let's go.
oh, like, we are seeing, like, this is a pivotal time in history, and I right now, feel so lucky because I'm really riding this AI wave as a industrial practitioner. And I'm excited because what that means for my workers is they're going to get the tools that they have always deserved, but we haven't invested very much time in making them as good as, like, a consumer application. So, I see things that my workers have wanted for years, and they've been on, roadmaps of applications, and no one's really ever gotten to it, or it's too hard. That's becoming a reality quickly, that they're going to get the tools that they need, for the first time ever. And so that's the wave that I am riding, and I am championing for my workers to make the frontline experience a lot better for them. So I'm excited in that way. But on the flip side of that, tools and applications that we've used for the last 10, 15, 20 years, they will be deplatformed, and they will be deplatformed in a fantastic way that we've never seen before.
So tell me more about that. Give me an
um,
example if maybe you don't want to use proper names, but at least just some examples of kind of categories that you think are subject or vulnerable right now.
like the everything is subject. What we're seeing out of like AI improvements, it's like I don't really even fully know what the future will be looking like, but I know that the applications will be different. I think that some of our applications that we rely on, they're too big to shift in this new world with this new technology with AI. Um, I see like culturally at these large enterprises uh, that some enterprises are doing a really good job, but the majority of our leadership are almost scared of AI. And the reality is, AI is here, it's here to stay. And it's not like a thing that you just bolt on to your app. It's like it's actually a platform and it's like a utility. So as an example, if your leadership is more concerned about making sure that there are guardrails and security and a process for all AI in your organization, and less focused on how are we enabling our workers to innovate with AI? Like your app, you're totally cooked. Like the world is moving so quickly that if you're not allowing your workers and encouraging them to use these tools at their disposal now, and you're actually discouraging them with all these controls, you're totally cooked in a way that like I don't even know if I can imagine at this point.
Give me an example of something that you think a frontline worker might really benefit from. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the market today that have you most excited about that?
So just the ability to have information at the fingertips and using lay language to interact with applications. Like I know that right now, how many of us are really using Google? It is much easier just to throw a prompt into Gemini or Claude and get something back at this point. And um, that's what our workers are starting to expect out of our industrial applications. And because AI is enabling us to build those applications more quickly, they will get it. And as a result, these legacy applications will be gone.
Yeah. What do you think senior leaders, I have some feelings on this, and I think some of them are probably legitimate, but what do you think senior leaders fear about pushing AI too far out to the edge of the workforce?
So, like, it's rooted in legitimacy. Like, I think well, I'm gonna preface that. I think a lot of it is rooted in legitimacy because with industrial operations where they're highly dangerous, they're expensive, you need things to be reliable and correct. So I completely understand why you wouldn't wanna bring anything into your OT without some vetting. But I also think that some of the behavior is protectionistic because the reality is our knowledge organizations are going to be shrinking, and in certain areas like within IT, they will be shrinking a lot. So I think that for a lot of these large enterprises, it's not in their best interest to be AI forward truly. And what they're doing is kind of a nod to using just a co-pilot or something so that they have something to tell like their executive shift that they're actually doing. But any like true effort to change is not in their interest, and as a result it's going to be like folks like myself on the external side, really creating these products with frontline workers, and then showing everyone that there's a better way to helping enable our workforce and keeping them more safe.
I was talking to an electric power company at a conference recently, a person at one of these companies. And I was asking him about the AI initiatives they had going on in their organization. And he had an interesting perspective. It was mostly focused on the knowledge workers in the organization. And what he was most proud of was their deployment of Copilot by Microsoft. And, he made an interesting point, which I think has some validity, which was instead of carving out a use case to affect a small subset of the population that can have a big impact, what they opted to do was implement a solution that had a relatively small impact, even if it's only and he said single digits improvement in efficiency, but across the entire organization of tens of thousands of people, that overarching, that was a bigger bang for their buck in the short term. I thought that was interesting, and I think there's merit to what he said. I think just the numbers speak for themselves. 3% across the entire population is a huge benefit, but it also seemed very risk averse, and non-innovative, uninnovative. It didn't seem like they were really trying to push the envelope at all in terms of how they were using that. And this was the guy who was responsible for AI innovation at this power company. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. And I think, it made me walk away from that conversation really wondering what opportunities are they missing because they are so risk averse. And I think the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, and so, like, I understand, and I think that you need to do a bit of both. And the reality is, so what I'm seeing is I know senior leaders, CIOs saying there's no AI in certain parts of our business. And then what ends up happening is you have the folks that are actually at in the operation just hiding it because we've reduced our workforces so much that we're all looking for ways to make our jobs easier. And so they're still doing it for those pointed use cases. They're just not telling anyone about it. And then you actually lose all control of your programs.
It's worse. It's worse.
Yeah.
This is the same. So, having been around through a few tech, spike periods, the first I would just say was, e-commerce and the use of the internet period. I was actually old enough to be around when there was no internet. So I saw that initial, boom in the 90s. The next version of this, I would say, is mobile. And then I would say this is now AI. And the common theme between all of these is that there was such adoption outside of the enterprise that it basically made adoption inside the enterprise inevitable. And in the way, all three of these waves, I think, are sharing some similar traits. And it's what you just said, which is the enterprise says no. The policy is no. We don't understand it. It makes us nervous. There's risk. They come up with all the big company bureaucratic reasons to say no to things. People start doing it anyway, and then they realize that they've now exposed themselves to actually greater risk by not enabling it and by pushing it outside their view, which doesn't mean that data is not leaking. It just means now it's leaking and you have no control over it.
Yep, I completely agree, and I love, like, right now, I would say the last frontier is this physical AI, and if people aren't less familiar with it, it's really like the democratization of all of the rest of the Internet of Things. So it's like your sensors, it's your mini microprocessors. We're talking about robotics, self-driving vehicles. It feels like the 2000s for phones and mobile devices for IoT right now. And that's where I am heavily focused. And I think that the next big opportunity will be.
Yeah. I just have to share this quick personal anecdote. I have a Tesla with full self driving. I had a meeting down in Austin. I got in my car, in my truck in McKinney, Texas, which is about 200 miles away from my destination. I set the destination. The car drove the entire way down there. And then the funny thing was, the first traffic light that I arrived at in Austin, I pulled up to the traffic light. The truck stopped at the red light. I looked over to the right and there was a Waymo next to me with nobody in the vehicle. And like my head just about exploded. I said, I just was driven, from one major metro to another in a robot, only to pull up next to another robot that doesn't even have a passenger in it, right? It's just mind numbing. And so that is an example of the very physical side of AI, or physical capabilities that are enabled by AI. And it is really mind blowing. And so just to then think what all the industrial applications of that are is just crazy. It's
Yeah,
exciting. It's an exciting time
it's
to be alive.
exciting, and the reality is, like, there's gonna be fewer people working at our sites in dangerous positions and jobs that are crummy as a result of it. Um, but then again, like, there's a disconnect. A lot of folks within industrial don't even have a connected device strategy for their folks, let alone connectivity in their warehouse, let alone, like, understanding their data streams because it's all in Excel. So, like, it's like the tech side is moving at light years and the industrial side is moving like a caterpillar.
Yeah. So let's talk about this though. This is actually an interesting time because having been around technology for frontline teams as long as I have been, I think there were in the early days very legitimate concerns by the frontline teams themselves about being replaced by this technology. I only say legitimate because I understand that they can feel the risk associated with, well, if you automate my process, then is there a future when I'm no longer needed to participate in this process? I've always said I've never been a part of a conversation where the goal was to eliminate headcount, but I understand how people could have felt that way. I think what's interesting now is that I think the tables have turned a little bit. I actually think the men and women on the front line who are hands on in the physical world are safer than our friends that are knowledge workers that are sitting in an office somewhere. I think more of those roles are vulnerable to being replaced through AI. The guys and gals in the field who are still turning wrenches on things, doing physical inspections, driving vehicles, doing all the things that people still will need to do for some period of time forward, I think they actually have some safety here. That doesn't mean that they don't fear AI, but I actually think the right story to tell them is that they have value in the hands on world that can't be replaced today. Now, I know Optimus robots are coming and all the other things are coming. So who knows what's going to happen. But I think for right now and for years ahead, there's still a place for them. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree that the script's been flipped a little bit, and I'm here for it. Like our field workers work so hard to give me such a cushy life. Like it's about time that they were recognized for their efforts. Um, but like the reality is, our skilled workforce is shrinking, especially on the front line. Like these applications are coming just in time, and this tech is coming just in time for the shortfall in the skilled labor force. And then we're talking about AI itself is limited to the physical capacity and infrastructure, and we need a bunch of workers to build all of that. And we have a shortfall of like what is it, like 30,000 workers in the states for what's planned already. Like I I feel like we're addressing a problem with these tools that we didn't know how to address, and it's like it's a gift, frankly. Um, and then on the skilled worker side, like I agree. I think that it is it can be very scary, but a very exciting time. And what I am seeing is if you are the best practitioner within your field, whether it's frontline, blue collar, or white collar, your skill set is only becoming more and more important and more valuable. So as long as you are continuing to learn and you work hard and you are the best in your field, the reality is you will just become more and more valuable and people will seek you out as what's happening with me. Like I didn't think that I would be working with so many startups and have this opportunity to be on this AI wave, but my skill set of knowing how things work in the field and then bringing it to our C suite, which more people really should have. It's becoming more and more valuable. It's about how do you actually apply these tools to be useful.
Yeah. How long do you think it's going to be until we stop thinking of AI like right now? I run a product company. We have conversations about how and when to use, not how and when to use AI, how and when to talk about our use of AI. And what I mean by that is, we kind of joked this morning. It'd be like, we don't tell anybody we're a cloud based SaaS anymore, because of course, that's how we would build, a software product in this day and age, right? So to say that we're cloud based doesn't really distinguish us from anything else. How long will it be until AI is the same way? Like, I kind of wonder, is anybody else out there saying, well, we're not using AI? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I've also thought about this because like it's becoming a feature that people are expecting. And so when do you stop saying that it's AI enabled? It's like if you're not using AI for that administrative thing within your product, then you're just not being very smart. So like why would you advertise it, right? Like I'm with you. I feel like people are learning about what AI is now. And it's like it actually is at the point where if you like if you're using it savvily, like you wouldn't even really talk about it.
Yeah. I do think so. I want to get back to something that you alluded to before, which I do think is a legitimate risk. And we're thinking a lot about this at Skillful in terms of how we recognize the risks and the downstream implications of some of the things that we experience as knowledge workers in Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and all the tools that we're all using in Grok. where we do see some hallucinations. We see some just outright falsities that come out in our interactions, and context windows get too long, and the quality starts to degrade. And so, as a knowledge worker, I can start to pick up on that and say, okay, this is no longer effective. I'm either going to go back to doing this thing manually, or I'm going to adjust my approach, or I'm going to switch from one AI to another AI, and whatever, all the ways that we kind of get around this. But when we're talking about, in my world, we're talking about building and distributing content that's going out to thousands or tens of thousands of people on the front line who have to believe that it's been curated and have to be able to trust that information. And so I think both things can be true at the same time. I think we can want to push the envelope. I think we can recognize that we should be using these tools. I think it's also okay to apply some pragmatism to say, what do we want to let out into the hands of the folks in the field? And so you talked earlier about, some of the corporate culture thing right now being very risk averse. And I agree with you. But I wouldn't say I would agree all the way to an extreme that we should just let everything out of the gate. What are your thoughts?
Like, it's like with anything, like, I think there needs to be a healthy tension between, having rules in place. Like, there's a reason why we have cybersecurity, like, and
Right.
I have a
Right.
healthy respect for it. But then we also need to make space for, what myself and some mentors call the rebels, so that
Hmm.
we allow for innovation. But when it's an all or nothing approach, that's when you get people doing stuff on their own, hidden in like some operating facility, and that's where you have problems. But then there again, Justin, when you're speaking about like you're a practitioner within your field as a subject matter expert, your expertise is so invaluable now that when you're putting things through a particular engine, or you're getting back like a wireframe for what you want to do next in terms of your communications, you've done the work before and you know if it's correct or not. So I think that like we're gonna have to look at tasks within like the realm of like what the risk is, and always have some kind of human in the loop as we go on this AI journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd love to just share a little bit about the way that we're thinking of this today at Skillful. And this is a constant work in progress. Like we don't have this completely distilled and figured out yet. But we think that for now, we want to protect information going out to the front lines and make sure that a human's been in the loop to have curated and approved that content. I think that there's a trust issue that we have on behalf of the customers that we serve. I don't want to ever put my customer in a position where our platform has enabled misinformation to get out. Somebody takes action on that, and a situation ends up worse rather than better. Okay. So I have a responsibility to protect ourselves and protect our customers from that eventuality. And right now, I have enough distrust just through my own experiences to say, okay, we're not fully there yet. Now, I do see a future when my trust and our, institutional trust can grow. And I think you raised an interesting point. I think there are different circumstances where the risk profile is different. All information is not the same. All actions are not the same. They don't all come with the same risk. And so perhaps there's an evolution of this where we start to look at certain information can go out because it's just a bulletin and nobody's going to significantly swing their actions based one direction or another. But in this case here, this definitely needs to have human in the loop before it gets out to the front lines. So this is, as I said, it's still a work in progress. And I'd like to continue to get feedback from people like you who are also on the front lines of this conversation and say, what's the most pragmatic, but still holding on to innovation way of looking at this to where we can continue to push and but not completely, subject ourselves to undue risk.
For sure. Like the risk has to outweigh, or the reward has to outweigh the risk, right? As
Yeah.
any decision would be. So I think what like I'm really putting on my engineer hat with AI. When we were first introduced to AI, it's like Chat GPT. We're lugging around these massive language models. But like that's bringing a tank when you need a Prius on like the front line of an operation for some kind of edge computing case is not the right tool for the job. So in like in the same vein, it's all about right sizing what kind of models or AI you're using, and then also right sizing it in terms of risk. So It's been an exciting journey, and all the use cases that are coming up, especially like I'm very excited, particularly about these physical AI use cases. um, we're seeing the engineering starting to be more right sized for what an operation would need, and that has so many knock on effects in terms of like cybersecurity, and all of the requirements with that. But then also in terms of like how much does it cost? Like like right size it so you're not paying more than you need to. Like, do you need to send all this data to the cloud when you can be making decisions in the field with like a microprocessor, like a Jetson? Yeah, it's very exciting time.
So tell me about some of the physical AI stuff. I got us distracted as I often do because I started thinking about the robot that I drive around town in. But give me some other examples of some physical AI solutions that you predict will hit the field, or that you're already seeing hit the field now, that kind of have a standout capability for you.
For sure. Like anything that, like for certain tasks, where we weren't able to measure or quantify or monitor, like it's becoming reality very quickly that it's almost like you have a person at work face. So like very basic ones, like we have conventional oil wells where you would have gauges in the field. You can have now like a $15 camera connected to one of those NVIDIA Jetsons and perform visual AI on these gauges. And only when it hits an excursion, it would ping to satellites and then actually alert the operator that this is an oil field that you should drive to first, opposed to the other 300 that you're looking over. So like that, like it seems really basic, but like this is life changing. Now you're actually being able to monitor and measure this really small site that you had zero eyes on. Yeah, and there's tons of edge computing opportunities, including like fine tuning some of our control valves in fields. The data that comes into the PLC, it's lagging by like even just like 5 seconds. Like it doesn't need to be much, but if you have microprocessing right at the field using like again like a nuke computer, you can fine tune your operation and get like on the order of magnitude of $1 million year on year savings within your spread, because you're not over diluting your feedstock to hedge any risk because you don't know what your valve is doing.
I think safety. This conference that I was just at, which was a power distribution conference, there was a lot of robotics, AI, so autonomous robots, and one of the primary use cases that was being promoted that really struck a chord with me was safety, of being able to put um, robots that are dispensable essentially into high risk environments so that we can keep our men and women out of those high risk environment situations, right? Let the robot go in and do that initial triage. They've got all sorts of sensors on them. Obviously, they've got cameras, they've got temperature sensors and stuff like that. But they had other sensors that they could add that could, test for certain, types of, substances in the air and stuff like that. That to me is such an exciting idea of being able to put this technology to where it is as reliable, probably actually more reliable than the human, and it takes the humans out of risk entirely. So that to me is an area where I'm so excited to see where we go. Like there should never be another human catastrophe because we put somebody into harm's way prematurely.
Yeah, and so like this is, you know me, Justin. This is why I got into this whole racket, is to improve my workers' lives and to keep them safe in big events. The use cases for safety with physical AI, like it's a game changer. Like there's so many examples. Another example is if workers are all wearing gas monitors.
Mhm.
If they're lucky, they might be connected gas detection monitors. And right now, because of just the way things are with tech, like they would individually ping the cloud if they had connectivity to the network. Um, with physical AI, where we're able to do AI computing in the field, we're able to turn those gas detectors into a network. Where if one worker starts seeing lower oxygen on their monitor, and then another worker starts seeing it, before we hit any limits or excursions, we're able to actually action that area and say, we're seeing a trend and everyone needs to evacuate or whatever you have to do. Like we're being much more proactive because we can do the AI in the field.
Before it gets up to a critical level where now we've already created harm, right? We've caused harm in some way. That's absolutely fascinating. So tell me where you think. I know it's so hard to predict, and we touched on this before we pressed record today, but um, it's hard for me to even get my head wrapped around where we're going to be. So I was going to ask 5 years. I think that's probably crazy. Maybe we wind that back in a little bit and say, where do you think we are in a year or 2 years when you consider the ramp rate that we're on right now and the acceleration of this technology? But I'm going to add a reminder as we think about this, like we still have some constraints of things that seem like they shouldn't be constraints, like connectivity in the places that we need this. And some of these things require connectivity. So where do you think we end up a year or 2 years from now? What are some of the things you're most excited about?
I th- I'm I'm very excited about as we were talking about like the impacts that it will have for my workers and that they're just going to have much better tools that are helping keep them safer, able to do their jobs. So that's what I'm most excited about, and I'm going to ride that wave. But in terms of what I'm seeing for everyone in industry in the next 5 years, it's really bimodal, and like the unfortunate reality is I find that the majority of us are not ready to take advantage of all this great new tech. Like you had mentioned, the journey that folks have to be on to even get like a cohesive connectivity strategy and connected workforce and then data strategy, like you're looking at like if you're very aggressive, like maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. If you're really aggressive, like I could do it in 5 years. So if I had a call to everyone in industry, it's um, like AI can be scary, like or we don't really know what's going to happen, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be like just aggressively doing the right things to have a solid foundation for when something emerges. Make sure you have your connectivity, your hardware, some semblance of process and data, so that when something does come, you're ready to take hold of it and use it to your advantage.
We're already coming up on the end of time. I knew this was going to zip by. Um, I keep saying that I think we need to make this a longer form podcast because by the time we get into the conversation, we're already past the timeline. As we wind this thing down, one of the things that from the minute that you and I met in Calgary years ago at a conference, I felt such a strong connection to you because we share an opinion about, or just a feeling about the empathy for the men and women on the front lines. And you've talked about that a lot today. You and I have talked about the value of doing ride-alongs, going out to the site. You spent a lot of time out in the field, and I love that about you when I heard you telling those stories. If you could share one thing with anybody who might be listening to this conversation to help them understand the frontline team members a little bit better, maybe who hasn't had a chance to go out and visit the field, what would you share with them?
Share that the importance of um just like being very humble, like approach with curiosity, humility, and just like good listening ears, as sappy as that might sound. But um the frontline workforce, they know when you are genuinely invested. They know um if you really care, like have a certain level of caring, have a certain level of humility. Like the amount of times that I've been proven wrong when I'm certain that I know what people will want or what the right tool is, like it's more than I could ever count. Um, like that is required to really building a fantastic product and doing really well in this space is to be humble and to be kind.
I love it. I can't think of a better way to wrap up today's conversation. Andrea, thank you so much for coming back and doing this recording with us. I really appreciate you spending the time today.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for listening to Frontline Innovators. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And remember, when we put people at the center of digital transformation, frontline workers thrive and organizations succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Skillful, helping frontline teams adopt the technology they need to work smarter, safer, and with confidence.